I want to interrupt that at 11. The Youth Council reps are here on time and in advance. So what I'd like to do is ask them to come up and make the presentation that they were planning to make. And then if they wish, of course, they'll be invited to hear what we have to say about the climate. So you want to go ahead and do that? So Jake, are you going to have a seat, or what's going to happen here?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very, very much on behalf of the Hawke's Bay Youth Environment Council for giving the members the opportunity to present their views on climate change and youth. I'll hand you over to them now to introduce themselves and their presentation, and yeah, hope you enjoy hearing what they have to say. Thank you very much again. Now, just check the...
Order.
Just press F5, yeah. F5?
We'll slide right into it.
Okay, take a seat. Unless you prefer to stand, it's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice.
As long as somebody knows how to operate the equipment.
Use the arrows on the keyboard.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So if you begin by introducing yourselves, and then we're happy to hear from you.
If we just get you to lift the mic up in front of you there, when you speak, the little red light will come on.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Raman Dillon, and I'm a representative of the Youth Environment Council, and I attend Hastings Girls High School.
Yeah. My name is Jothis Joes, and I'm also a representative of the Youth Environmental Council and also from Hastings Girls High School. My name is Manraj Kaur, and I also go to Hastings Girls High School. My name is Bernadette Casanti. I also go to Hastings Girls High School.
Yay!
Yeah, so we'd just like to welcome you all to our presentation on the youth perspective and involvement in climate change. Yeah.
So, young people, did you know they make up more than half of our global population? So, the youth want to increase their voice and concerns for the global environmental condition of our world today. But the youth feel uncertainty at the risk of climate change. We want to raise our voice, but we're not entirely sure how to, or if we're being actually heard. So, and we want to know what the impact of this climate change will be on our future, because it will directly be affecting our future.
We wish to see a society more environmentally conscious of our consumer choices. We need to unite in changing our rapid demand for material goods and invest in more longer-lasting, environmentally friendly purchases. So collectively, we can affect the way corporate industries manufacture, distribute, and appeal products to their demographics. And together, we want to apply this pressure so that we can get change.
So when we were preparing for this presentation, we thought, where should we start? And we thought the most logical place to start would be asking the youth, what do they really think? So we went onto our social media and we asked
some of our peers
all
about
of our
what they think.
Yeah, we got about 50 replies for each question. Yeah. We asked 3 questions. So the first question we asked was, what is the most concerning global issue for our generation?
And the most of the answers were saying climate change, pollution, and all that. And then we asked, why should the youth care about the environmental changes that are happening? And these are some of the replies, just a few of what we got. And they're saying that it's because this is going to affect our future. If we don't do anything now,
then our future generations will be affected by this. And
Earth is our home. So if we don't look after our home, then who will?
And it's quite clear that for our first two questions, it was a very clear consensus what everyone thought. It was that climate change is a huge issue and it's an important issue because it's our future. But for the third question, we asked, what can the youth do in helping these environmental issues? And there was a huge variety of answers that we got. We got so many different ideas. So throughout our PowerPoint, we're going to have quotes that we got from our peers. They're going to be in a light green color, and you'll see them pasted throughout our PowerPoint.
Jesus, what are you saying? Are you Karen?
Okay. So our first point that we want to touch on is the fast fashion industry. And we decided to talk about this one first because we thought that the fast fashion industry really has us, the youth, as a demographic. They're really targeting us with all the new trends and things. So we thought it would be a really good place to start.
Yeah. So with the industry, the chemicals that are made through the process, they end up in our rivers. In many cases, these rivers are the only clean source for heaps of people around the world.
And not just people, animals as well.
Yeah.
And the whole fast fashion industry and stuff, it's not only an environmental issue, it's also a huge social issue. The bigger countries and the countries that are more rich are taking advantage of people in smaller countries that are working 24 hours a day and we're destroying their homes.
And there are some facts up there for the fast fashion.
Or the waste that it produces, or the water pollution that it has, everything like that. And so we thought, how can we really change this? What can we do? Because when we look at industries like this, it looks so huge to us little people, and we don't know how to start combating that. And what we thought was that even though we feel so small and it seems like such a big issue, any small change that we do will help.
And make a huge impact.
Yeah. So
we can do this by finding local shops that are selling thrifted items. We don't always have to buy new things. We can buy vintage, we can DIY, and we can do all their things. We don't have to buy the best brands. We don't have to buy the expensive ones to stay fashionable or to just look nice in general.
And buy eco-friendly marketed items.
This one here, we have a graphic here which we thought we would share because it's just showing that the richest 10% of the population of the world has 49% of the CO2 emissions, and that's opposed to all the other places. So when we're thinking of blaming, we don't want to put blame on anyone, but when we're thinking about what can we do, and we see that it's actually the 10% of the population, the richest 10%, that is causing the most harm.
So these are the first world countries, as we would call them. We're causing so much damage to our planet, yet we kind of just don't do necessarily anything about that. Yeah.
And I think the saddest part is that the islands are probably the ones that are feeling it most. Those little countries on the islands that are being affected most by the rising sea levels are the ones, and they're probably the ones that aren't contributing anything with their lifestyles.
And as first world citizens, we should adopt the mindset that tomorrow isn't just for us, it's for the people in other countries, it's for the countries that we visit, the travels that we want to do, and the waste that we produce as a contributor, not to just the waste that we're sending to overseas, but to the waste that is produced here, but is impacting people all over the world.
So what can we do about this one? Well, we thought the easiest thing to do would be just to reduce and to stop buying so much. I think a lot of the things with all the eco-friendly things that are coming up, a really important thing to remember is that we can't use these eco-friendly marketed items as an excuse to keep buying things. As long as we just reduce anything that we buy, it'll be really good. And just reusing as much as we can.
And we've got a fact up there that says 50% of the world's plastic goes into items only used once. And coffee cups, straws, water bottles and plastic bags are the big 4 contributors of this. And these are items that are convenient for us as consumers. We find them convenient, but they're inconvenient towards our environment and they're inconvenient in the long-term effect that they have.
And what we could do is maybe just start using reusable shopping bags and takeaway cups, and just those small things can make a huge impact.
Yeah, so next time we go to a fast food restaurant, we can maybe ask them, can you put the food in this Tupperware that we brought? And can we use our own utensils? We don't always have to get the things that they give us. We can say no to them. Have the courage to say no. Yeah.
Right.
So this one here is just our little graphic showing that about 300 million people spend over 5 hours a day on social media, and we just added that fact to really remind you how big social media is and how much of an impact it can have when we're using our social media platforms to raise awareness.
Especially in a time where social media and technology are thriving. Yeah. So yeah, educating. So we think that and this is one of the answers that one of our peers actually gave us as well. So having programs in school from a young age to teach and acknowledge the issues that are going around us will help us in the long term to teach us of what we can do to help. Yeah. And spreading awareness through social media accounts as well. So the YEC has, Hawke's Bay Environmental Youth Council has a Facebook page where you can go and have a look at all the activities that we do. And there are plenty others like that as well. Yeah.
And just so many people on Instagram, like just anyone, they really do care. And every day I'm scrolling through and I'm seeing so many posts about the environment, all these things that kids really do care about. And they're trying to do their best to just spread awareness and stuff.
And you have to make the effort into looking at sites like this instead of the trending Kardashians news or what's the trending film or who's got the most, who's making the most money. We have to look at things beyond just the convenience and the reality of how far
the world has come in this situation of climate change. Yeah.
And so one of the big things that students across the world have really started to do is the school strike for climate, obviously. And so just the picture on the right, that's actually in Napier. And the way that the protests were organised, it was really important and really impactful because it caught the attention of the government, and that was the main thing. And we've got the quote here that said, students should be particularly committed for choosing the choice of strike as a tactic. And I added that quote because I thought it was really good to show that it's important that we're doing this, that we're striking, that we're going out of class and we're taking our time out to do this, because it's showing just how important of an issue it really is.
And through this, it captivates the attention of the government, and hopefully from there they can make a change, because that's where really the big changes are going to start.
Yeah, because as young people, how much financial or political power do we really have? But if we're able to capture the attention of the government, it will be where the change will happen.
And as we can see by this, Auckland, Wellington and Dunedin city councils have declared that there is a climate change emergency and would like to see that in Hawke's Bay.
Yeah, so the time to act is really now.
And so this brings us to our efforts. What has the Youth Environment Council been doing? And we have actively been involved in beach cleanups around Napier, especially because most of our members are located here. But it's just that effort to know that what we're surrounded by, and to really find out how, and you'd be surprised by how many cigarette butts you find, how many plastic bottles you find, and while it's not our intention to throw them away like that, even if you're putting it in a public bin, you'll find that wind, and you'll find that seagulls, it'll spread. So you need to reduce what you throw in bins and what you are consuming. And the World Oceans Day was a great event, and Bernadette and myself attended, and we had the great opportunity to judge a sandcastle competition. And this was, and children between the ages of 6 to 11 competed in this. And their aim was to portray a message, an environmental message. And we were truly surprised and shocked by the creativity and the knowledge and what they actually understood.
Yeah, like people or kids like 6 to 11 years old, and they already know what course our Earth is taking. They're already so aware. Oh, this is what the rubbish is doing to the turtles. They had like a little sandcastle of a turtle, and like they collected all this rubbish from around the beach, and we're very much aware of what's happening to our Earth. And these are kids so little.
And they used resources from the beach, so those plastics that they did find, unfortunately we didn't have the images, but they found a lot of plastic and they used that, and that was just from the beach alone.
Yeah, so there is progress being done. We are continuing in a path where we could just save the environment, but we all need to do that. It's not just one person, it's not just two person, we all need to do that.
And this brings us to our upcoming events. And we want to be, our intention with screening a film this year was to find a film that appealed to a wide range of audiences, and we chose WALL-E because we thought children would love it, teenagers would love it, and hopefully adults would love it. And this film, if you know much about it, and if you don't, that's all right, come and see it, because the message is the environmental threat that we humans have on the Earth, and the potential that one day it's not going to be inhabitable, and that one day our lack of responsibility and our lack of action will mean that our need to overconsume will show an environment that just cannot support it.
And I think it's really good, this way of showing and teaching these lessons instead of like a factual documentary. It's sort of like, in a way, WALL-E kind of makes fun and like satires humans and like the course that we're taking and all the consumption that we do and what it's going to do to the environment. It's sort of just showing us in a fun, like light-hearted way
that it is getting the message across,
and especially to the kids. Yeah.
So another event that we have coming up is a quiz night, and it will be held at Napier Girls High School. And so by holding a quiz night, our intention is generally to just educate the teenagers, the youth, the ones who are going to be inheriting the future of what the climate is being like currently. We want to talk to them, we want to educate them about the history of climate change, what we used to be, and the current situation, how we can help, and the future of what we could be if we don't do anything about it.
And we found that a quiz was engaging, and it would open up discussion amongst their peers.
And also help us find out how much knowledge they do have already.
Yeah. So there's always something to gain, we found.
We are also planning to go visit Rob Berry's sustainable farm, and through this we just want to find out the perspectives of the farming, and especially because dairy is such an important industry to New Zealand and its economy. And we don't really know how much harm it's doing, so we want to see how much of a difference it can make through the sustainable farming practices.
And it's going to be really exciting for us because we can all try and reduce things like meat and dairy and stuff, but the ones that are really going to make an impact are those farmers. And the fact that Rob Berry has done such a good job in building the sustainable farm, we're really excited to see it.
And the fact that he's so young, he's only like 27 years old, yet he has achieved so much. He's
true inspiration to us.
He really is true inspiration, yeah.
And that brings us to the end of our presentation. I think the message that we want you to take away from this is that youth really do care about the environment, and we care about making change.
And we do want to make change.
Yeah, we
we need help though, because there's not much we can do.
We need the adults to listen to us, or just at least respect what our views are, or what we think.
We're willing to learn, and we're willing to be taught, and we're willing to spread that knowledge. And we hope that you can contribute towards this pathway that we're trying to go on. And it would be really nice if we could see you at the film nights, if we could see you with your family, with your children, trying to make this effort and trying to show them a different pathway from what we know as today. Because our reality right now is that we're not acknowledging this. We're pushing it to another day, to another year from now, where you see the same children, maybe different schools, different names, but they'll be here and they'll be telling you about the importance of climate change.
They will be begging you to do something about it, because it is going to affect all of us at the end of the day.
And it's our uncertainty because of what we feel about the future. And we wish to see change and progress.
So, I don't know, the next time you go to a beach, maybe just collect a little bit of rubbish, you know?
Help your children, make your children help you.
Yeah.
Make it a fun activity.
Yeah.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, so this is a quote by Greta Thunberg, and I'm sure that you have all heard of her. She's very young, yet she's very passionate about the climate change, and she's achieved so much, and again, she's a true inspiration for all of us.
Definitely.
So you say that you love your children above everything else, and yet you're stealing their future. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great opportunity.
Thank you.
Stay seated, please.
Now the blowtorch is.
We're not going to let you off at ease. That was an excellent message, extremely well presented. Clearly, the problem is not at your end of the table, it's at this end of the table, isn't it? And I'm just curious, how far ahead of your parents are you?
I would say that I have influenced my parents a lot. My mum was really reluctant to purchase bamboo toothbrushes. Just it's a very small item, right? And she's like, but it's $3. And I'm like, Mum, did you ever think that all the toothbrushes I've earned are still present? They're still here. Like, even though we've thrown them in the bin, they're still on Earth.
Yeah, and even when we die, they will still be here.
Yeah, my persuasion skills got me that bamboo toothbrush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sold. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. As you're aware, no doubt, we did declare the climate emergency at this council a month or so ago. That was an interesting. I had a lot of interesting debates on social media with different parts of my constituency too about that. But you talked a lot about things that you can do and stuff like that. One of the things I found really useful with my kids, and my younger ones are your sort of age, was I said, go down and have a talk to your grandmother, because she was brought up, her mum, so my grandmother, she brought up 13 kids during the Depression in the 1930s, and knew an awful lot about reuse, recycle, refuse, all that sort of stuff. That's how they lived their lives back then. And so that became ingrained into what my mother was doing. So I said to my kids, go and ask your grandmother, what did she used to do before they had plastic bags? Go and ask her what did she used to do before they had plastic bottles and all that sort of stuff. And my mother and my kids had really interesting conversations about that. And in terms of finding out how you can do things and how you can change your life, that's not that long ago that since we've started this whole single-use stuff, and the consumerism is something that's only come in since World War II in a real big way. So go and ask some of the older generation, and I think that some of them make really interesting videos as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Firstly, thanks very much. It was very inspirational to listen to you. Hastings Girls High must be doing something right, and they're doing something very right when they're producing students like you. So you'll be aware that the Regional Council, which is us, we are responsible for the environment here. The rivers, lakes, streams, estuaries, the air, and that probably just about covers it. And there's people my age have done a terrible job over the last 50 years, there's no doubt about that. But what do you think of us now? What kind of job, what's your impression of all the people sitting around this table and the job that they're doing and their aspirations? Do they fit in with you? And we need an honest answer.
I think, yeah.
I think there's definitely been a change because like plastic bags now, we have to pay for them, and there's more people that are starting to bring their own shopping bags.
Yeah.
There's definitely been a change since these past few years.
Also, you guys just taking the time to listen to us and what we have to say really shows that you really want to change and you really want to.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think there is that idea amongst teenagers that adults aren't the most confronting about climate change and about reusing and reducing all that. But I think, because I work at a supermarket, and I started when we were trying to ban the plastic bags. And I won't lie to you, I got some customers that were pretty angry, saying that they didn't want to pay 20 cents for a paper bag and they didn't want to pay 99 cents for a material bag. But in months since, I've seen a lot of those customers bring those material bags. I've seen a lot of them wanting to reduce the plastic they use for their veggies and all that. And I think they've recognised that they need to act, and change is always difficult, and change is always something that we're not willing to accept as smoothly, but
it is something that we are going to have to accept. And I think that most of the adults have accepted that change, which is brilliant.
Councillor Barker and then Councillor...
Just two things. Have you thought about running for elected office? I think you're a great candidate. Seriously, I just think about that is that people need to see, want to see people out there who believe things and believe them genuinely, and I thought it was fantastic. So I'll leave that with you. The second thing I'd ask the Chair and the Council to do is, rather than leave your presentation buried in the middle of the videoing of this report, I'd like the Council to pull it out and put it on this Council website as a report from Hastings Girls High School to this committee, so that people who go on the website can see it immediately rather than have to search through it, because I just thought it was fantastic. I think everybody would love to see a group of young people turn up, articulate, intelligent, and argue a logical position with passion. It's very reaffirming. Let me tell you that. It's just wonderful to watch.
So Drew, can you make that happen?
Thank you. Means a lot. All we want to do is educate everyone on it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would suggest to my Hastings Council colleagues, be afraid, be very afraid.
Standing in Napier. Hastings is in good shape. Maybe the forward behind.
You've what makes you believe in climate change? I mean, where's the evidence for that? You've got the leaders of the free world, or I won't say that, the world leaders saying it's not true. What on earth would make you believe that there's going to be climate change?
I mean, we really can physically feel the climate change happening. It's getting hotter. I come from India, and the temperatures there are absolutely crazy. It's so hot you can not bear through it, and we can physically feel what's happening around us, and we just need to accept that. And some
temperature occurred way back in 1930. What makes you think
it's definitely increasing?
We can hold definitely.
Well, isn't that climate change? Isn't it? Climate change can go hot and it can go cold.
It can fluctuate.
What makes you believe that?
What makes us believe is once you become aware of what you contribute to climate change. I didn't realise how much plastic I consumed, especially single items. And it's not just about what's it like outside. It's not just about what's it like in America or India. It's about knowing that 3 years from now, we don't know what's going to happen. It's knowing that the weather, while it's cold or it's hot, you don't know. You just don't know. And it's that uncertainty and the risk that it poses as the youth we feel.
And I think looking at the pros and cons of believing it versus not believing it, if we believe it and there isn't an issue, well, we've just helped the world a little bit more, and there was no problem to begin with. If we don't believe it and there is an issue, well, we're in a lot of problem. However, if we just don't believe it and there's no issue, it's just thinking about what is the best thing for us. And if we're going to lose anything by believing it and by taking change, well, we're not really going to lose anything. We're just going to better the planet even more.
That's the best argument.
You've met your match.
Again,
Thank you, Councillor.
I just would like to thank you girls. I thought you were absolutely gorgeous. I was at the local government conference recently, and we had a climate change series of presenters, and the two young girls there they tended to stand up, and I know you have to be really courageous to stand up in a public forum, but they were, we want. So I was interested in how you would come across today, but you haven't come across saying we want, and it's an adult conversation rather than a child-parent conversation where, well, how are we going to negotiate this, You've come and you've told stories, which is, it's just fabulous, and you're living examples. So I do have a question for you, but first world problems, I know, when you walk along the beach, what do you use to put in your, pick up the rubbish with? Because I used to use the plastic bags from the supermarket all the time. That's an issue for me. I live out at the coast a lot of the time. I have problems with I'm picking up a lot of rubbish all the time. Also food waste in the supermarkets. I get brown paper bags now to put my produce in. They don't keep as well in the fridge. I end up throwing out more produce. So there's got to be a balance there. In terms of, we, instead of banning all plastics, we need to offer some other solutions as well. The use of the word emergency, I have a problem with climate change emergency, because I think it's a misuse of the word emergency, which has made me struggle to support the movement. I think, for me, sustainability or responsibility are better, more appropriate words. So I'm interested in your responses. What do you think about the word emergency? Is this a genuine emergency? Like the house is on fire, we move quick, but...
I think because we're still standing here and we're still living, we can still see the sky and stuff, it doesn't feel like an emergency. But only time will tell what happens. And I feel like the way that we use the word emergency is sort of just giving that sense of urgency that, if something is going to happen, we should maybe work quickly. Yeah.
And I do agree with your consumption issue. I think we just need to you need to find that balance between what you need and what you want. If you see, I'm a sucker for this. You see avocados and they're $1 or they're 2 for $3, and you're barely gonna get through one.
Yeah, and buy 5 or
And it's the convenience. You have to acknowledge how convenient something is to you and how inconvenient it is in contrast.
And we also need to think about everyone that's affected. I think because I think a lot of people do think of climate change, oh, this is the goal, we need to work, everyone needs to make change to do this, except there are some people that can't really make those changes, like people that are vision impaired and need the plastic packaging to tell what vegetables are which and this stuff. Yeah, it's different for everyone, and we need to be considerate about what everyone needs and just make our own steps slowly and in our own pace.
Yeah, we can't just say that this is what we have to do. We have to be adaptable. We have to be versatile, and we just need to think about everyone else's concerns and adapt to that, and just change with that. Yeah.
I'm happy to move, Chair.
I'll second.
Anyone else wish to comment?
Yeah, I'll just put one quick comment. I'll see you on the 18th.
Thank you.
Since I didn't get a chance to ask any questions or anything, I'm really pleased that you've come here. You've presented this in an interesting and informative way, so that's fantastic. I just want to make the comment that when the climate change emergency request was brought to this council, it wasn't brought by the young people who so strongly support this movement. It was brought by an old fogey. How on earth did that happen?
I would say maybe it's because with young people, councils and governments seem so high above us, we don't really think about going to them first.
Coming here, we were quite
we had no idea
very nervous, quite scared.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we're getting those connections and realizing that on both sides we both want to listen to each other and we need to work together to do anything.
Yeah, I don't think the youth fully understands how much we can do, because maybe once we did do something, the bigger people turned us down, so we might be a little more scared or a little more skeptical to go up again, but now we know that we can. Yeah.
It's experiences like this that make me want to tell my peers, actually I recommend go to the board, do it, talk to them.
Just people.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you, girls, for such an enlightening presentation. It was such a delight to listen to you.
rather than listen to some old farts around the table thinking they know everything. So again, thanks very much for coming. And it's great to know that the future of the planet is in your hands.
At least in Hastings. You don't know about Mayfair. So we have a mover and a seconder. Did either of you wish to speak further?
Yep, just to say thanks again, and never be afraid of challenging authority, never be afraid of challenging the likes of councils. Just remember, we all put our pants on one leg at a time, unless you're one-legged, of course, but we're all people.
So we have...
I'm not sure about that. Motion
is to accept the presentation and report. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Accepted. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And you are welcome.
Fantastic. I love it.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, we'll go to the paper on climate change and regional response. And
Page 65.
I'm looking here to see Dale. So Dale, thank you for this paper. I'm going to assume we can take it as read, but if you want to give us any overview or make any comments, please do, and then we'll barrage you with questions, perhaps. Or at least you can referee a conversation about the issue.
Thank you. I think the paper is generally straightforward and self-explanatory. I think the key messaging around this would be that we would look to do some more background work, pulling out what we're currently doing and developing a status report so that the main focus in terms of engagement with the community is for 2020, the calendar year. So our manager of communications, Drew over in the corner, is currently developing a significant program of engagement with all members of the community, young and old. And so that is something that the incoming council will have the opportunity to be involved with.
I'm not going to do the question-comment bit, so you're free to comment, question as you see fit. Councillor Barker.
Yes, thank you. I read this really carefully, and a couple of things that struck me was this report is written, I would have thought, from the basis of an institution, which it is, and institutional response to it. And what I think we need to do is to turn this thing around and embrace the sort of message we've just heard from these young people, that we want a groundswell community engagement with it, and we therefore want a coalition, a public coalition agreement to this, and it's to be a community thing. So to see the regional council as not the driver of it, but the catalyst to create something that happens. And from that, I thought there's a whole pile of elements which are missing here. I see use of the word stakeholders, which sort of makes me sort of instantly flinch. I'm not happy with that. I thought there were other elements which are missed out of here. Stakeholders, what does that mean? I would have thought we were looking at having members of parliament engage us across all the political spectrum. Everybody, industries, industry organisations, communities, and dare I say it from this, representatives of the youth. So that we should be having each school presumably could be able to have 2 people which is responsible. So we want the schools to be doing this. We want a Hawke's Bay public commitment. This is what we're going to do, and we want to be the catalyst to make this thing happen, rather than drive this as what I saw this as a planning policy process. You with me? And so I want the thing turned around. From that, I want it to be almost a political campaign. I thought one of the things we should be looking at doing here, I'm happy to move an amendment to this, is that we should try and start this by having a widespread public meeting similar to what we had, led by Council in Hastings on oil exploration. An all-up public meeting to start the discussion. People come along, we say, well, here's some ideas, how's the framework for this? And then getting ourselves, getting people to commit to the Council's objective, if that's what they will do, to carbon neutrality by 2040, and then embarking on a plan that we all do something. What we heard some people say, they would give up our toothbrushes and take bamboo ones. We persuade everybody else to have bamboo ones. We all do something. We all have to change our lifestyle. We all have to change what we do to make this happen. And I didn't quite get that sort of almost fervour we need out of this paper, with no disrespect to the writer, because that's not what you hear to write as political speeches from the throne. But that's my feeling was missing here. We need a bit more movement, politics, coalitions. I want the language to change and the way in which it's done change. All the rest of it is great.
Councillor Bevan, and then
thanks, Tom.
Wilson.
So a couple of comments from me. It's all covered here, but there are two elements to our response to these issues. One is, what can we do to reduce our carbon footprint, and that might be putting solar panels on the roof or buying electric cars for our organisation or whatever. And the other is mitigation and adaptation. And I think that in whatever papers we look at in the future, there needs to be two streams of thinking and action. And it's quite, to me it's quite clear. I'm not saying they're not covered, I'm just saying that there's no particular distinction made in the paper, and I think there needs to be. The second thing is, I'm really happy that you're talking about taking this to the public, because that's the communication to get other people on board is absolutely critical to this being successful. The third thing, I'm really happy that we want to approach the government and talk about introducing climate change as an element that we consider in our Resource Management Act decisions. I think that makes a huge amount of sense. And the last thing, there's a part here that deals with working with local government and what have you, and it mentions possibly widening the scope of the Joint Committee on Coastal Hazards to cover the wider topic of climate change adaptation. I can tell you that was pretty firmly rejected by both of the TLAs in workshops that we had with them in the past week. They see that as our responsibility, and if that is the case, then we need to take the lead.
Councillor Wilson.
I'll just, nothing really to add. I thought you had a pretty good summation of stuff when you talk about the next steps. I just had a question around additional external expertise and internal resources. Probably a question to Mr. Maxwell. I mean, what quantum are we talking here? Just like broad brush. I get we're pulling the threads of what we have done for 30 years together here, in regard to flood protection, etc., and the coastal challenge that Councillor Bevan just outlined. But what sort of external resource are you talking here? Is it more of the public connection, or what are we looking at?
I'm not sure it's fairly addressed to Ian. I think this is Tom Skirman's
He's the biggest pointy head sitting beside you there.
Yeah, he's sitting on my left, so he's going to...
I might have the biggest pointy head, but it doesn't
Hospital pass, I think it's
See, Chris has still got his head down on that.
The reality is that if you looked at the list, the bullet pointed list there, they cross a range of kind of portfolios for GMs. We haven't had that conversation to say, well, what else is what additional resource would we require to build this? I mean, we've got right tree, right place, for example. What's missing in that list is our erosion control scheme, which is clearly right in that space as well. And I know full well I've got a lot of capacity building to support that that I'm working on at the moment. So it's not absolutely clear in many of these areas exactly how much more we would need to drive these programs.
But from some conversation with James, I guess I would venture that in using Councillor Barker's terminology, what may well be needed is a campaign manager. There are a lot of people with functional responsibilities that cross over here, but the impetus that I think we all want to give this requires, it is a campaign mentality, and it probably requires a dedicated campaign manager who's on the line to pull the pieces together and make the parts all work together. So,
perhaps, sorry, one other comment I'd make, and that it's going to help frame the discussion, is that nationally the sector's having this very conversation as well to figure out, well, what are we doing and where are we going with this gig? And so an important bit of work that we're pulling together now is, well, let's take our current activities that actually fit a climate change portfolio, but we don't necessarily talk about as such. So what are we currently doing? It's a bit like our biodiversity activities. There's an enormous breadth of activities that we do that could land in a biodiversity portfolio, but we don't necessarily tag it as such. So what's the kind of existing suite of activities? And then once you've got that knowledge, you can start saying, well, what additional levers would you add? What more resource would you put into the ones that are likely to have the most impact?
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. We've got a paper here that's full of words like emergency and crisis. We have increasingly frequent storm events, and we've also had a QC come out and indicate that there are culpability issues raised with the words emergency in terms of regional councils' declarations. So what I'd like to see in this, and I'd like to see some teeth, but I'll direct it to you, Ian, seeing as you've got the big hat on here today. The Tuki and Waipawa rivers, we've got aggregate issues that continue to accrete in parts. They're placing significant risks on the townships of Central Hawke's Bay, Waipukurau, Waipawa and surrounding communities. So I'd like to see us get some teeth here, and what are we doing about it? Because we've acknowledged that we've got an emergency, we've got frequent storm events, and that's one very real risk to our region that I don't believe is addressed here, despite my banging on about it for 6 years.
If I can provide an update, I guess we've previously stated that in terms of flood mitigation of the Tuki scheme, the current gravel levels don't impact the flood protection level of that scheme. So we've previously said that to council, and there's other issues, I guess, particular issues on particular land holdings that a grading gravel is providing. So I don't think it's fair to say there's a heightened level of risk to those communities. That 1 in 100 level of protection is currently being provided.
And the QC culpability issues that have been raised, has that been looked at anywhere, Ian, are you aware of?
Sorry, the QC?
Well, we've had a leading QC come out and say that there will be libelous issues as a result of this word emergency being used. So
libelous?
Nonsense. So look, I'm not across that sufficiently to be able to answer that, sorry.
Councillor Crick.
Well, Mr Chair, I'd just like to perhaps pause a bit on this, because and it's not a reflection on the production of this report. I'd like to start again. I'm picking up on Councillor Barker's comment. This is an institution's response to the notion of emergency. This doesn't scream emergency to me at all. This talks about reports, sort of stock taking, where we're at, etc., without too much momentum being considered. I'm quite serious. I think we should start again and perhaps break it down into what we know is this to me is tramline institution responsiveness to an issue tabled with staff, and I totally get where they're coming from in producing this. We need to translate it from that, an institution's stock standard response, to a real emergency. And by that word, libelous as it may sound, which is, ridiculous.
I'm just pulling up the article here, so
yeah, well, that's so be it. I don't care about the article. I think it's nonsense. But what I'm saying, Mr. Chair, is that, and I think the girls captured it, it's about using that term in terms of urgency. I'm not seeing sufficient urgency in the response. I'm seeing the need to demonstrate clarity around the approaches, whether you're an exacerbator or a mitigator. So there are two channels of work that can be considered, and we need to know much more about our own council and its contribution. Other councils, we can take a leadership role there. We have consideration of land use. So what can we say about Hawke's Bay, the region's emissions profile, and what are we doing about mitigation, of which we're doing significant amounts. So I'd like to see a completely different approach adopted to capture emergency and to capture urgency, and I'd be interested to start again on it.
Point taken.
It is an institutional response, but we are an institution, so we need to do that. That is one side of it, and I want to capture the nuance of both Neil's and Rick's and yours, Tom, your statements. And that is that, firstly, we need to be the leader in this space because no one else can do it. So we need to be the leader, and it is an emergency, as we've just heard from these young people, and we know ourselves. This is hitting us now. And now is in the next 5 years. Now is now because we're doing all sorts of, continue doing all sorts of stupid consumerist things. So firstly, we need to be the leaders in the region, and we need, this is a marketing program to our community, so we need to market this in the simplest little things, like the toothbrush. Because like the returnable, I mean, I was in the supermarket last night and I forgot my bags, you know, so I saw a bloke unpacking some stuff out of a cardboard box, so I grabbed one of his cardboard boxes. I'll tell you what, 3 months ago I would never have done that. You know, and it's being brave enough, as they said, you know, to take these issues on, and, you know, I would never ask the guy for the box and take it up. And so I went out with all my groceries and I had this big cardboard box and I drag it out. And that's the kind of thing we need our community to do. And it's the little things. And I don't think we are marketing it very well. We still have house prices on our coastal communities rising. Well, that's quite extraordinary manifestation of how well we're selling our message and how well the message has been understood. So I do think we need a dedicated response to this, and it's going to cost us.
So before I remark, go ahead.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just a question, and this relates to what Councillor Hewitt was going on about with the Upper Toki scheme, because I see in your list on page 68, you've got the Hiratonga Plains Flood Scheme Level of Service Review. I would have thought the flood scheme level of service reviews was for actually all schemes and not just Hiratonga, is it?
So I guess the question was around, there was a question around resourcing. So we've got 25 schemes.
Yep.
To understand the climate impact to all of those schemes and whether they're viable and whether there's an economic case for change going forward. That's something we need to look at all of the schemes. So eventually we will be looking at all of the schemes. You know, there's a step change here in the amount of work potentially we would need to do. Clifton to Tangoya is a $200-300 million program, so that's a step change in resource. Again, Hiratonga Plains scheme, we've been looking through the history of that project. That's probably been worked on for about 8 years to get to this point. If we were really going to crack it and substantially increase that level of protection over the next 10 years, it's a step change to how we're currently resourced.
But is it not fair to say we're obligated to go from a 1 in 100 to 1 in 500 year event horizon for all schemes at some point?
So I don't think we're obligated. I think we need an economic case to demonstrate that the investment has benefits for the community. Often there's thresholds, so we could spend a lot of money to get almost no additional protection. So we're bringing a paper to council on the Heratonga Plains probably at the end of the month to understand the history and how we got exactly to a 1 in 500 year, but I'd say different schemes would have different levels of protection. Certainly our drainage schemes are not flood mitigation schemes, so they will never have such high levels of protection. Those schemes are more about the day-to-day use of that land for agriculture rather than protecting from frequent events.
Thanks for correcting me on that, Chris. It was my understanding that the jump to 1 in 500 was we were obliged to do that, but that's okay, that's fine. Just my other comment is on, and this kind of listening to the other comments from, especially from Councillor Barker, because it was one thing when I thought when I was reading through this is that this is like it is the stock take of where we are at the moment, and then we've got to, what do we do to move on to the next level? And it's about selling. So the idea of having a campaign manager and having a campaigner go around it, I think is really useful and something that we need to be looking at doing. So yeah.
You have a further?
I do, just because I've been challenged. So the article was in the Dominion Post recently, and I'd like an action, a response from James. Jack Cotter, QC, told Local Government New Zealand there could be legal claims against councils for not taking actions. So he's talking about actions and auditing and not just being shallow. And his words here are declaring an emergency seals their culpability.
I would hope that we would take enough action that we would not be sued, and if we were, then I would step up the efforts in response. But anyway, when I read this, I thought it was a workmanlike recitation of appropriate work streams that have to be undertaken by an organization like this to move the ball forward. But I wrote down slow motion. It just seemed to me like it was like, oh, we're gonna go out and consult, and we're gonna bring along the councils, and we're gonna do this, and we're doing it. When I circulate around, I hear what Mr. Apple is doing, what Somerset is doing, what 3R is doing, what Pyroclastic Fires is doing. There are people way out ahead of us. The DHB is way out ahead of us in terms of addressing these issues, and so. I think Rick used the word catalyst. So yes, we need a campaign that reaches all parts of the community, engages all parts of the community, but I don't want to spend a lot of time. Peter has felt the issue here of bringing along the slowpokes. But there are fast followers, and there are people moving quicker than we are in this space, and we need to be the leader. No one else is going to pick this up in a leadership way. I shared with you, there's a paper sitting around that has some survey results of a survey I took, and I would just bring your attention just to two of the results of this. And I'm just going to refer to the people who responded to this survey via Facebook, which is a fairly broader segment than my own readers in this case. But what it says, two things here. One is that 40% of these respondents disagree or strongly disagree that global warming is a grave threat to our planet. Another 43% disagree or strongly disagree that Hawke's Bay will be seriously affected by global warming. That's a big chunk of our public that has to be brought along here and educated through whatever process we do. And I would have regarded the people who would be responding to a survey that I'm undertaking as more on where these young ladies are by affinity. So there's a lot of work to be done here, but there are a lot of people in the community ready to do it, and particularly in the business community, because as one of the young ladies said, this stuff it is becoming practically necessary to do it. And it's profitable to do it in many cases, and businesses are going to respond to that. And so, I think from internal discussions here, I think there's every intention that this needs to take on a campaign style. We have to do the grunt work to justify and explain what we're doing and build the case and have the programs. I would be terribly embarrassed if the Future Farming Initiative was not something that wound up, there's going to be a huge effort made over the next few years to figure out how to measure greenhouse gas emissions at a farm level, how to measure it, and what are the mitigations that can be undertaken to deal with it at a farm level. And so if we're not in the middle of that, if the Future Farming Initiative isn't in the middle of that, we've completely failed as far as I'm concerned. And so all of these pieces need to be brought together. I think the paper does a good job of indicating there are a lot of pieces that need to be brought together, but all of the comments here about pace, about leadership, about marketing and political leadership are totally, I'm certainly on board, and I think that is where the next council needs to be headed. So,
Could I just say to Sarah, the writer of this, can I just say to you, all these comments you should not take as a criticism of your work. Please. You have no permission to sit in this building here and write an entirely political campaign. None whatsoever. The only way you can do that is if we say that's what we want, and then it's our responsibility. So these comments you should be taking as permission to reach further than you would normally do for your job. That's what I want to say to you. There's no criticism. If you had written that political campaign for the thing, I would have said, what is happening in this council building? So let's be clear about that. You've done exactly the right job, and I'm really grateful for it. So there's no criticism of you of that. But I think you're getting here a sense that councillors want to go further. But it brings me to the next point, is that I know that Tom says we have to move the pace, and I agree with that, but I think given that we've got an election coming up somewhere in the near future, some of that might have to wait until we've got the new council set in and do that. So we've got to be mindful of that. We can't overreach here. The third point I'd make here is that Tom's survey is correct in that a lot of people think it's somewhere else. And it's someone else's responsibility, because that's what the leadership has done. Global warming has been decided, it couldn't. In every other high-profile, desirable holiday destination on the planet have had these massive meetings and have gone to Paris and all these other wonderful places. And when anybody's ever read about it, it's being done by those people way over there. It's had nothing to do with people's own personal lives. And that's what I loved about the story about the toothbrush. It's about what we do every day, Mum. This is here and you can help. See, that's what Tom's survey shows, is we have not made the connection, and we have to bring it back to what we do in our everyday lives, how we live our lives, and what we do will all have an impact. And that's where it gets into politics and the campaign. So I think this conversation has been just wonderful. There's been no disagreement on the outcome, particularly, but we have had some disagreements on the pathways and the language that was used. With respect to the emergency, can I say that that comment I read myself, and it to me was like a leading loss, a leader item in a supermarket. I put them up, look at me, look at me, look at me. And that to me is a QC saying, you know, I'm a bright boy here, I'm smart, and I'll put out this provocative thing. To which I've said, when I read it, I thought to myself, this is utterly irrelevant to us, because who is going to put up $250,000 to file a claim in the High Court to sue us for what? I searched my brain as hard as I could, and I thought there's no one I know who's got that amount of money for that amount of stupidity, because it's never going to win anything. So I just put it as a kite-flying exercise, and I'd ignore it. And if anybody wants to sue us, let's have a go with Tom on that. So let's not be deflected by the language, and let's not be deflected by our means to get to somewhere. We're all agreeing this, as I sense it. We're just not quite clear on a path. Neil wants to go this way, but we're all heading in the same direction. I think this is an outstanding discussion.
Would someone like to move that we receive this report?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Seconder?
Chair, do you think it, in terms of, I know the recommendation is only to receive the report, but given the discussion that we've had,
An amendment.
yeah,
Just in a general form. So receive a report, and that the next report be framed around a campaign gaining community commitment to achieving the Council's 2040 zero carbon goal.
excellent.
Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Any other discussion? Would you like to speak, mover?
Oh, no, I just want to thank the writer for the report. I want to thank the staff. I want to thank the chair of the council meeting today for being a leader and a prompter on these things. And I want to thank the young people who turned up today for making all this. This is all starting to gel, in my opinion, and I feel good about this. As one of the old farts, referred to as Peter Bevan, I feel personally I feel a significant amount of responsibility that I've been a participant and a bystander in some way of watching this.
That big motorbike.
And we need to, it uses less gas than your car. and that I feel that I have a commitment to make sure that we turn this around and do better. Not just because of my own thing, but because we all have children and grandchildren. And what the young people said to us today, we need to hand them the world the best shape that we can, and we haven't done it yet.
Thank you, Chair. I was especially impressed with one of the responses to Councillor Curtin's question about climate change, which was around the point that if we do something with urgency, we're actually improving the world at any rate. But if we don't do anything, then that's a much greater risk than doing something. So I think if we move, we're moving forward, and we just need to be moving forward with a bit more pace. And I like the way that we're going to do that with bringing the public in much more. So yeah, the risk of doing nothing is huge. The risk of doing something is way less.
I just think that we should offer the job of campaign manager to the young ladies that presented today.
I'd agree with that without even doing an interview.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, as the mover of the motion. I'd just like to think that we need to change the language. It's to old carbon emitters as opposed to the other term used, old farts. We'll just go to old carbon emitters. The point I'm making, and I'll just reiterate what Councillor Barker's had to say, this is not a reflection on the staff's report. It's a very good report. What I think we haven't done as a council was signalled with great clarity what we want to see, and that's a transformation in the way we are living and in response to this emergency. I, for example, think we need to go out and examine our transport, our whole approach to transport, our whole approach to travel abroad. We need to challenge the entire region around this thing we do, old farts, old carbon emitters, in our dotage. Is we want to travel the world, and we want to do it 2 or 3 times a year. And the impact, we need to count, though, the cost of that. So that would be a huge challenge to our community to say, do you really want to do this? This is the impact that travel is having on the world, and can we do things differently? It's a challenge to the way we fund and operate our whole tourism market. Is it time to reflect on that and change the way we do it? Is it a challenge to the way we operate our bus fleet and invest millions of dollars a year transporting people around? So they are questions that are reasonably asked as a part of this exercise. We are clearly the stewards and observers and reporters on climate, the land use in the region. what are we doing to ring the alarm bell, the emergency bell around the way we're using land? Is there an opportunity, as Ian has mentioned, in terms of our catchment approach, to demonstrate mitigating some of these effects through our planting regimes and the like? So, Mr. Chair, what I'm saying is perhaps just sit back and rethink how we're going to do this. What can we really do to demonstrate and to raise the stakes, to transform the region from its current rate of consumption across the board? You had a few examples of that from the group of women from Hastings this morning. What can we do to mitigate these things and change our behaviours? So they are the challenges, and I'm really keen to see us move from the approach we traditionally adopt as reporters and observers and cheering from the sideline, to be an active leading player in this, to bring about real and meaningful change, so that it is in fact an emergency and not just a loose and haphazard word we're applying at the moment.
No further comments. I'll put the question to accept the report as amended by Councillor Barker and seconded by Mr. Bailey. All in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. So we're going to move to the next agenda item, which is market research. True.
They're now questioning.
Including some more on this subject, I think.
We're leading everybody. I'm proud of it.
Thank you again. Good morning. The climate change just keeps popping up in all the various items that we cover. So this is the market research results, and it's the survey itself is really looking into what is the awareness of Hawke's Bay Regional Council, what's the awareness of our role and our work, how we communicate with our community, and then we've added in for the first time this year some new questions on climate change. So it's a 2-yearly piece of market research that's conducted. This year there were 800 people that completed the survey, and it is regionally representative, so it gives a very fair spread and understanding of views from Wairoa and then all through the Napier Hastings population right down into Central Hawke's Bay. It's coming to the Environment and Services Committee today. Normally it would come to, I think, corporate and strategic, but it's really just down to timing and a desire to release this research to the organisation and also more publicly, given the findings that are in there. So into the key findings, one of the key ones is that just in terms of recall of who is the main environmental organisation in Hawke's Bay, there is a significant leap in the regions and the residents' understanding of who is actually doing the work. In the past, we've been confused with other organisations such as the Department of Conservation and other territorial councils, but over the last 3 to 4 year period, you've seen a marked increase in recall from the number of 52% in 2015 up to 76% from this most recent survey. So 76%, or 3/4 of the regional population, now reflect on Hawke's Bay Regional Council as the main organisation that's here to look after their environment, or to look after the region's health and well-being. So that in itself is a significant finding and a positive marker for the Regional Council, in my view. And then also the survey findings tell us that 65% of the responses that we received tell us that, or confirm to us, that water is the main issue of concern for Hawke's Bay people. So it's probably not telling us what we didn't already know, but it's certainly confirming to us what we believe in the work of the Regional Council. The new questions around climate change, and this is a very, very summary presentation in the report itself. You did receive the report, the market research, and I apologise that came to you late, but you do have that market research sitting in your inboxes and available to you, which has much more information in it. In terms of those questions about climate change, though, 64% of the population are saying that they are somewhat to very concerned about the impact of climate change in our region. And around 30% of people are saying that we should give that high to very high priority, which has been the topic of a fairly extensive piece of the conversation today. So I'll leave those numbers there. I'm moving on to point 10, that 73% of residents stated the value of services they receive from the regional council as being acceptable to very good. So 3/4 of the population are quite happy with the way that we're delivering the services to them. But I'll note there that there's an opportunity to drill down into those that say the roughly 25% of people that also, I guess, identifies who are saying that they actually get poor value or very poor value from the regional council, and I will look further into what's driving those comments behind the people that rate us as delivering poor or very, very poor value, because there's an opportunity there for us to do better.
Drew, is that figure, how's that changed from the last survey? Like you've got all these numbers in here, yes, which is really cool, but you haven't actually. I mean, I appreciate like the climate change is a new question, but I would have thought that was an old question, in which case there should be a trend.
Yeah, there is. See if I can drill it out for you. Poor to very poor value. In terms of the value, the reflection actually has changed very marginally from the last two surveys. So that's sitting at a total of 73%. It was 72% in 2017, and it actually was 76% in 2015. So it's roughly wavering around the same point. Yeah. But there's still an opportunity, obviously, for us to look further into it. I'll move on to So there's an opportunity there for us to look further. In terms of point 12, it's saying that email is the preferred way that the regional community have identified to receive information from us, and there's emails, there's social media, so Facebook. We found that 82% of the regional population, as far as digital services, are using Facebook as their main means of receiving information. So that's still a significant focus for us. But equally, we still use a range of different channels. There are still areas in Hawke's Bay that have limited access to the internet. So for that reason, we still use, again, a range of other channels, radio, newsletters. We found that simply sending a letter into somebody's mailbox is actually a great way still of reaching them directly, and that's been borne out through the port consultation that we did and through our long-term plan consultation as well. In terms of next steps, yes, staff will take the report itself and work through areas where we can modify or improve the services that we are delivering. So, for example, where that resident dissatisfaction, where residents have showed the dissatisfaction with the regional council in terms of the contact that they have with us, or where that perceived value of service was poor or very poor, I think there's an opportunity to drill down into the verbatim comments that came through, the actual comments that those respondents have made, and see where we can improve in that way. So again, the full report is available to you, but this is just a very summary of what's available in that overall market research, and I'll ask you to receive the report, and I welcome any comments.
Question, Peter.
Just interested in the sample. There's 800 respondents to this. Was there a reasonable mix between males and females? Was there a reasonable age sample across the survey sample or not?
Yes, there was, yeah. So in terms of male to female, 47% or 48% of respondents were male, 52% were female. And there is a reasonable, it's in the report that you've received at the very back of it, but there's also a very clear spread of age groups, and again, regional representation from CHB up to Wairoa as well. Yep.
Drew, did you say you had a fuller analysis and you'd sent it to us already?
Correct, by email.
By email. Do you recall when you did that? Because
I believe it was the start of this week, and it was, again, my apologies. That was on following up that I believe, that as soon as I found out that I didn't believe you had it.
I don't recall seeing it, that's all.
Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Drew, I just want to go to the climate change question. Is that a new question?
Yes.
When was the sample taken?
The sample was taken from the end of April through till mid-June.
Okay, so we haven't got a benchmark against.
We haven't, no.
Okay. I was very pleased to see the very significant, good, acceptable, very good performance from Napier. That's excellent. But just looking at...
Before you get too excited, Councillor, I would note there's another prior question in the survey that just asked people open-endedly, what's your biggest environmental concern? And as the summary report indicates, 65% one way or the other said water was key. Climate change was 1.4%.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from here, Mr Chair, is that we've got, in your own results showing us that, in fact, something like 40% of the public actually don't accept or agree or disagree or strongly disagree that global warming is a threat and that's a regional threat. So this result confirms that outcome. So it goes back to the earlier paper, Mr Chair, where we've got a very substantial hurdle to climb to shift opinion on this matter. I was just going to ask about those things that matter most, and you've addressed that. So the water issues are the ones that are at top of mind, and I'm sure that's in Napier. And the climate change issues are somewhat down the track and on that. Is that fair? A fair summation of that, Drew?
Yeah, I think the results there speak for themselves. Yeah.
There's a footnote comment in the report that residents were not always able to distinguish the water-related responsibilities between regional and city councils, and so it seems to me that probably with the move that is now being undertaken with the three waters and the melding of how maybe that should be managed and so forth, it's going to become increasingly confusing to people as to who's on first base in this space. I mean, even with respect to water quality, which you would think would be naturally our domain, but then if you get into drinking water, and it's all very confusing here. So I think we're going to have a challenge going forward talking about water and who does what and what is the governance structure for approaching all these issues that overlap and mix up and what have you.
It's clearly Napier City Council's fault.
Pretty clear.
And the failure of the local political leadership.
Who reside in the western sections of Napier.
Are there any other questions, comments? This is for information at this point. Is anything that surprised the hell out of you?
That's a question to
you. Oh, sorry, that was for me.
I'm sorry.
That question surprised me.
No, it did.
That was a physical cue.
No, I mean, I think I'm familiar with the report and I've seen it over a period of years, and I think the comment that I make, well, there's always certainly work for us to do. In terms of the community responses, where they've rated us, and it's usually on a quadrant basis, where you've got importance and performance, all of the work of the Regional Council as rated by the community sits in the upper quadrant, where it's important, but that the work that we're doing, we're actually performing in the upper quadrant. So generally I take that as a good signal, that we cover the full spread of what the community expect us to be working on, and that we have a response in every area that they raise a concern. While we do sit in the lower part of the top quadrant in some parts of the work that we undertake, there aren't, from what I can see, any gaps in what we're delivering, is my comment.
So the answer to the question is no.
No. No surprises.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Happy to move it.
Councillor Curtin has moved it. Would you like to, you'll have a chance to comment?
I'm happy to second it, but I haven't actually seen the summary. There's nothing in my emails, and it's not even Councillor Bevans either, so...
I'll follow up.
Yeah.
I received it. And we all, I saw the email come through, all of us, but it was about a week ago. Might not have been called, might not have been clearly identified, I would say, but it was sent out. So are you happy to second or not?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Well, just very briefly, Mr. Chair, now that we do have a baseline for the climate change questions, we ought to be very mindful to constantly update our understanding of the public perception of that matter. And I wonder whether Drew can have that conversation with the constructors of the climate change plan to be a close party to gauging public perceptions around that. So I'd encourage that to take place. We certainly need to accelerate our understanding of the public's either understanding and acknowledgement of the issue and any impacts that we may be having in changing responses to climate change. Mr. Chair.
Councillor?
No further comment.
Councillor Barker?
Just listening to Neil then, a thought just suddenly occurred in my head. We have here a concerning low level of, in our view, perception of the threat of climate change and appreciation of how significant its impact would be. We have this view that not everybody sees it with the same degree that we wish to. And we wish to try and bring our community to the point that they are concerned and about the issue and prepared to take action themselves to do something. I think when we're configuring this in the future, Chair, we're going to have in mind to be a balanced approach, because we could rate this issue so much that we could make people deeply worried and hugely concerned to the point that they become almost traumatised by it. I do know people who are thinking, for example, you read reports in the paper that people are thinking about not having children because of climate change. So we need to, when we're making our thoughts with this, we need to make sure that we have a balanced view, that we get people to the point that we get the register of the issue with sufficient concern that they then will take actions themselves, not to the point that we traumatise the community by being overly concerned. That's my comment on this.
Any other councillor review?
Just a comment, it would be helpful if the defence team through in future putting attachments with the agenda rather than sending out emails, because that's a couple today and it's hard to do adequate prep, whereas if they're attached where that should be, it's easier to work through and do it justice.
That was my intention, so apologies.
And actually, that comment reminds me, what the email said was that the document was being added to the Dropbox. It didn't actually attach it. So if you missed that email, then you were out of luck. So anyway, any other comments? I'll move the motion to receive the report. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, no. Can we do SkyTEM?
Thank you.
Yep. So Jeff's here. Jeff's going to run you through a presentation. Look, this was really just to bring you all up to speed on where the project's at and a little bit more detail around what the SkyTEM is. Two reasons. One is there was obviously a bit of email traffic recently around some people with some views on what this thing is, and we just want to clarify for you what it is and what it isn't, so you're able to tell people at your various gatherings about it. And the other is that
The first thing I think about when I go out for dinner with someone is SkyTEM.
So we want you all to be proficient in the language of SkyTEM. And the other, of course, is that very soon there'll be a helicopter flying around Hawke's Bay with a big thing hanging underneath it, and people will start asking questions. So
I thought just tell you whose swimming pool is
So this just kind of gives you a bit of a sense of the technology and what it does, and a little bit more about kind of timetables and costs. So I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Thanks.
Trustee scores.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction, and hi everyone. Look, I'm going to go back. It's been a couple of years, I think, since this was punted up as a proposal, as a business case for the LTP. So I'll just go through a little reminder of why we need airborne aquifer surveys and what exactly will SkyTEM deliver. And there's also the provincial growth funding that's come in since the LTP was adopted as well. So I'll talk about that, what that means, and what will it cost and when is this going to happen. So, and then happy to take any questions afterwards. So, one of the main reasons we need SkyTEM surveys, and this came up I think at the last ENS committee meeting where Councillor Bevan asked why we need it, haven't we got enough bores out there to tell us what's going on. This is an example from Denmark where these black dots are bores, and the information that you get from bores is sparse. There's quite a different distance between bores, but also each bore has different quality of information. Some of them don't even have bore logs, so you don't know what they've drilled up. Many don't have pump tests. And in this particular part of Denmark, these are the aquifer structures that were identified from the bore details. These dark areas here are the aquifer structures, and these other areas are thin or no aquifers. And then, this is a few years ago, then they ran a ground-based TEM survey. So they didn't have a helicopter, they just went around, and all of these black dots on here are where they put hoops on the ground and took one reading in there. And they came up with completely different aquifer structures. They didn't even know that this aquifer ever existed. And it looks completely different from that. So it gives us a much greater conceptual understanding of our aquifer systems. And of course, if you're flying over, you get incredibly significantly more data points than what that ground-based survey will give you. And those new aquifer structures that were, well, they're not new aquifers, but the revised aquifer map was confirmed with new boreholes that they drilled just to make sure that they'd got it right with the electromagnetics.
I just have, can go back to that map. So if there was no aquifer, how can the people getting water out of bores? Those other little black dots.
Oh, maybe it was just thin aquifers, or maybe they drilled and...
Could have been drilled and it was a dry well, that's what I thought.
There's hundreds of them.
Yeah, like these ones around here, for instance.
Yeah. Where are they getting their water from?
They may have been drilled and didn't find water, and that's why they've identified that there's no aquifer system there. And these ones down here, who knows why they didn't find water, because there was an aquifer there.
They might have found water.
Yeah.
But the other answer is that which map's right?
Well, the one on the right has been confirmed with boreholes that were specifically drilled to validate the electromagnetic data. So
It's been validated?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I trust the one on the right.
And obviously it's not just in that example, that's been done a number of different times around the world. So the technology's proven before it comes here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely it has.
You're the sales team.
He just wants to get a ride in a helicopter.
And then we don't just get a horizontal picture of what's going on in the aquifers, we can build these really cool three-dimensional geological maps, and they're powerful for visualisation, but also we can significantly improve our groundwater models. I mean, it's not to say that the models we've used for developing our plans and what have you aren't fit for purpose, because they are. They've been through hearings and they're fit for purpose. But for meeting the new challenges that we've got, and you know the discussion around climate change today is a big one, then we need a greater understanding of our aquifer systems, and we need the models to be built to answer new questions, which is what we get with SkyTEM. This is an example from a groundwater model that was developed near Cromwell, and this area, it really had three areas in the model with hydraulic conductivity properties. So this brown area up here had high hydraulic conductivity, and these little green strips along here did as well. So it's really broad aquifer properties going into that model. They did an electromagnetic survey that was nowhere near as powerful as SkyTEM, and overlaid that, introduced that into the model, and all of a sudden they came up with this amazingly different pattern of aquifer properties, which all models are wrong, some of them are useful. So that model might have been useful for some applications. This is going to be useful for a whole lot more applications, and you get much more greater detail on where the aquifers are and what the properties are in there. Also, nutrient management is going to be greatly informed by SkyTEM as well. So the way we manage nutrients, where we look for where the greatest load is going on the land, is pretty broad brush, and it largely ignores the reduction processes that are going on in the ground. So there's an assimilation that happens as nitrates are reduced, the oxygen's releasing into gas and or ammonium. So this is an example of what we have in a lot of our aquifer systems. There's a thin strip of oxidised water at the top, and the water down the bottom is reduced or depleted of oxygen. So for example, nitrate going in this location goes into the groundwater system, gets reduced, and it's no longer nitrate as it discharges to the surface water bodies. But there are parts of the aquifer where the nitrate does get in. And so we really need to understand the aquifer structures in great detail to manage our nutrients on the land. So what is SkyTEM exactly? Well, for a start, physically it's this massive big hoop that weighs about 700 or 800 kilograms, and a person standing there to give you an idea of the size. So I've been asked before, could you do it by towing it around with a drone? And the answer is no, you need quite a substantial helicopter to tow that around. And
I reckon that's a conspiracy of Ian Maxwell to get himself a helicopter.
What's wrong with getting a bigger drone?
Mine would be a Hughes 500, not a squirrel.
So on the hoop, there's a whole bunch of instruments. Basically what's going on is this is a transmitting hoop where it transmits, creates an electromagnetic signal going on in the ground, and then there's a receiver there, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on to get the GPS locations and the altitude and the tilt of the instruments and all of that. But that hoop is the main piece of kit, and this is how it works. It induces a primary signal into the ground, where the electromagnetic signal coming back is received, and this is what happens. It's turned off and on really rapidly. These are microsecond sort of time frames here, and the instrument up here, the receiver, measures the rise and then the decay of the electromagnetic signal, and that tells us what resistivity the materials in the ground have. And as I said before, the Otago study that I showed you used this old technology, which can tell you a bit about what's going on in the upper part of the aquifer, but as you get deeper it's pretty useless. So if you hear any criticism about what we're doing, just check that they're not talking about this, which was done in Southland and Otago.
So, just as if I can interrupt, since you've got to criticism, the criticism to that chap who wrote me the letter I forwarded to you. Firstly, did you write back to him and just say that you don't agree with his science? I mean, because I think that's important. And secondly, did he have any validity? He sounded credible.
Could you get closer?
I can't hear you.
Oh, what did he say? Well, he said it was rubbish, really, poor technology.
He was saying that they used it in Southland and they didn't get any valuable information from it. And what I was suggesting in the response I sent out to councillors is that the Otago and Southland studies used that aeromagnetic
So he was definitely
stuff.
talking about that second one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's just like a torpedo. I think they can actually mount it on the skids of the machine, where the hoop's much bigger, gives you much more information. Okay. And even though they use that technology in Otago, they still did get some really good information for their models.
So what frequency does that broadcast on?
This one over here, I don't know the
What did we use it?
frequencies, that's 5. It's a bunch of different frequencies going into that, the full spectrum. And what they're doing is using the, I think it's the high frequency stuff tells you what's going on in the upper part, and then the lower frequency looks right down into the bottom, so it's a dual moment technology.
Can't be the full spectrum.
Of the yeah, maybe not.
But it can't be the full spectrum of electromagnetic field. You just don't have anything that could produce that. But I'm just interested in what frequencies, and the second I'm interested in is what power.
Chair, just in response to your earlier question, I think that's a good point we've probably missed in responding to that person. So he had written to you all, so as staff we hadn't replied to him, but if you'd like, we can on your behalf.
No, I would really like it. I think it's important we do reply.
We will do that.
And say why he's wrong.
Okay. So I've heard that it's caused cancer. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
He heard it from me. I just said, well, we have claims against schools and kids.
Neil's point is, when you go over Hiratonga with a big thing like that, there will be some nervous people, I guess. They'll see this big thing flying over them. They'll want to know what kind of radioactivity. And so we do need to probably, I don't know how you PR this, but we do need to tell the public somehow.
Yes. Oh, that's absolutely part of the project planning. It's a big part of it, doing that before we even think about getting a machine.
Neil was just being cynical.
Well, I was hearing the expert advice I got from Councillor Barker.
So FAQs...
That's the point I'm making about when asking...
Can we proceed here?
FAQs are probably an important point that we'll make sure we've got covered off to cover off any of the
That's the
theories.
point about the question about the frequency and about the energy, because people get these things and they think they're something else, which they're not.
Yeah.
The cell phone generates a lot more than things. So people think the cell phone's good, but the sun generates much more. So we've got to get the facts in there so you can do a sort of comparison. What does this actually mean?
That's dead right.
And seriously, Ian, when I look at those diagrams there, I keep on thinking of back in 1969 when Apollo 11 took off. That's the sort of thing we used to see in the paper then about describing what was happening with the moon landing, and it was quite cool and informative.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to put some fairly out there information in there.
Sure.
There was no moon landing.
Be bored of the hoax.
So stage one is flying, obviously, and this is the flight plan for the head of payment plane.
That's right.
So this might look like it's all shaded green, but there's actually transects in there, and they're 200 metres apart, and the helicopter will fly along all of those transects, and that gives us our information, taking a reading every 11 metres along that transect.
What height is he?
Oh, it's pretty low. They fly like less than 100 metres. The actual equipment itself is 30 to 50 metres above the ground. Yeah. So we're not doing where there's infrastructure around the towns and cities, because it just doesn't work. The infrastructure affects the electromagnetics too much. But it was a really good point you made, Councillor Bevan, last time about, well, what about all the bores that we've got? And these blue dots are the bores that are greater than 50 metres deep. And there's not a lot of them, and as you get to 100 metres deep, there's very, very few. And there's big gaps in between them, so we're just making educated guesses on what goes on in between them. And SkyTEM fill those gaps in 3 dimensions.
How long will it take him to cover that?
I think it's 15 days of flying in there, including 2 pilot days off.
Sorry, to what depth does it examine?
It depends on the conductivity of the material, but it'll be between 250 to 500 metres.
Say again.
250 to 500 metres.
Really?
Yep.
Well, that's deep. Not many aquifers that deep.
Yep.
Really bad.
I've actually put outcomes up there, but that's not right. They are outputs, so we'll have an improved conceptual understanding. We'll be able to know exactly where the recharge areas are, where the confined and semi-confined areas are. Our modelling will be greatly improved. Much better understanding of groundwater surface water interaction and areas where the aquifer is vulnerable to contamination, and we can explore the extent of deep groundwater resources and aquifer properties deeper than any bores have gone. So they're outputs, but the outcomes are, one of the big ones will be building climate change resilience by understanding our water resources better and being able to manage them with more certainty. This is the Ruataniwha Basin, which was also funded through the LTP, and again, the transects are really close together, and there's are quite big distances in between those bores that are greater than 50 metres.
So can I just ask a question, Jeff? So you've got the outcomes, or you're now calling them the outputs there, enhanced understanding, etc., etc. But then I look at the final comments, number 24 in the paper, and it says SkyTEM will not enable precise quantification of groundwater volumes. This is a largely irrelevant metric for water allocation and management. So you're putting some quite strong limits around the benefits that we'll get from this. Can you explain what benefit it will bring in terms of, if any, in terms of allocation from our two aquifers?
Yep, and I really wish there was a whiteboard, but I'll try and explain with my hands. So the main point I'm making there is that you'll read stuff in the papers about what SkyTEM's supposedly doing, and don't believe it all, because it's not. It's been reported that it's going to tell us the volumes of water in the aquifer, and it won't. We can make a better guess at it, but at the end of the day, that metric's irrelevant, because you could have an aquifer that's like 500 metres, and the groundwater levels here, and down here where it meets the surface is a stream, and you could have like 500 billion cubic metres of water under there. But if you drop that aquifer at the top, below that level of that stream, the stream dries up. It doesn't matter how much is underneath it. And that's what we're dealing with in the Heratoga Plain. So that's why the actual volume in the aquifer is irrelevant when it comes to allocation. And SkyTEM will definitely inform us on what's going on with surface water interaction and other bores.
Does that answer the question for you?
I can understand that.
Yep, good.
Yep. It's how full the bathtub.
I think it's a really important point, that probably not one of these FAQ type questions that we want to explain, you know.
Doesn't matter how big the bathtub is, it's how full it is.
It's all about the relationship with the surface water flows. Yep.
Without even a whiteboard. Brilliant.
Birds work.
Yeah. So after we've flown it, then there's a lot of work to be done taking the electromagnetic data and creating these inversions, which are basically looking at the resistivity of the material in the aquifer. So this one only goes down to about 90 metres, something like that. Anyway, it tells you the different resistivity of what's going on in there. And that's stage 2, and then we need to look at existing bore logs, and if we need to, we'll have to drill some holes to just validate what these resistivities mean. So over here you can see that low resistivity is clay material. When you start getting into the high resistivities, you've got water-bearing sands. So these are sand here, and that was verified where you see these circles here, purple ones, that's where there's sand showing the bore logs. And these blue circles are where there's clay. So you're interpreting the resistivity data based on what we do know about these bores, and joining up the dots in between and below. And then there's another stage as well. We can then take all of those transects and combine them together and create these 3D models. So this is one example of a 3D model. It's just taking slices horizontally at different depths through the aquifer. And these high resistivity areas are water bearing. And what I've identified here is that these are old buried river valleys or paleo channels. We can find good groundwater in those, and the bits in between, like here, that's like clay sort of material where you wouldn't want to be drilling in. So that's another outcome, if you like. It's going to be able to guide drillers and people wanting to drill for water. And those 3D models are valuable for us to visualise and get a conceptual understanding of the aquifers, and then we can take that understanding and improve our groundwater models. And then that's what the LTP funding was going to provide, was Heratoga Plains, Ruataniwha Basin, and then start getting into building some fairly basic 3D geological models at the end of that. What the PGF's providing, well, in the first instance, it's $2.15 million. It's, the application's been accepted, and we're just going through the process of getting contracts signed and delivering a robust project plan with the Provincial Development Unit.
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah.
I mean, subject to contract, how likely are we to get that? Or it might be a better question for Ian, could this become an Indian giver?
No, I don't believe that's at risk. It's just a matter of working through the contracting details and things like project governance that the PDU are interested in. So I don't believe that's at risk. It's just process that we have to go through.
And you can also see here that GNS Science have chipped in with 300,000 co-funding as well. So our investment in the LTP, I think it was about 1.4 for the survey and a bit of inversions, and then there was another 200 including the capex that was carried forward that the past discussion was about for drilling to support the SkyTEM interpretation. So we've got a total of 1.6 million in cash and about 200k of in-kind contribution. And that's what our council, I think, courageously committed last time to go and do this survey. And from that, they've leveraged this amount of money from the Provincial Growth Fund as well, plus a contribution from GNS Science. So it's given us a $4.3 million project.
Is that enough?
It's never enough. We can always do more. But yeah, this is, in my opinion, this will give us a Rolls-Royce outcome.
It's always the wrong question to ask a scientist.
Yeah.
Are we buying Toyotas here?
But this is so important that we need to make sure that it's correctly funded.
Yeah.
Because this is just going to be, next 50 years, can be really important information.
No, in all seriousness, this is a Rolls-Royce SkyTEM program.
That's what we want.
Yep.
We want Rolls-Royce.
Yep. And so along with that extra money, we've added in the Otani and Pokawa basins into the mix. So you can see it's quite a big chunk of the region, and they're our two major aquifer systems, and then these other two basins where there's issues. And for the Hiratonga, we're also adding up the valley here where there's just river terraces. Just we want to explore that just by doing 4 transects up there. We don't think there's going to be a lot of variation, but it'd be really good to just get a better handle there. And then it's kind of fun, but there's also science behind it. We want to do 4 transects out to sea because well, obviously seawater is highly conductive, so you can't see as deep as you would over the plains itself. But overseas studies have showed that when you've got 10 metres of seawater or less, you can still get some pretty good information from that. So we're just going to try, it's a bit of a trial thing, doing 4 transects 1.6 kilometres out to sea.
So Jeff, will that part up the river there, will this overall give us a better read on recharge?
This area here is pretty much where all the recharge, all of up here. There's not a lot of recharge happening up here, I don't think. There's definitely groundwater there, but most of the recharge is coming from the river down here and over this area here where the unconfined aquifer system is. And that will definitely give us a better handle on that recharge for sure.
So on one hand, your report is saying, well, it doesn't give us a more accurate picture of the total volume of a given aquifer, but does it remove any mystery around whether we're mining or not?
In the respect that it'll give us greatly improved groundwater models, it removes a lot of some of the uncertainty from the modelling, which really tells us whether we're mining the aquifer or not. And so, I mean, the models have already shown that we're not mining the water per se. We're altering the storage somewhat by abstracting water, and the storage decreases a little and other things happen. But the models have shown that we're not mining the resource like in the Middle East.
Tom, I have a question too. You talked about it'll look at threats to the aquifer, which I'm really interested in, especially around Roy's Hill, where the old dump was. I'm really keen, and I nag Ian about 3 times a year, about really understanding what the threat is, having that old dump there that is filled with all those dreadful things, which we all know is in there. And, you know, is it a threat to our aquifer? Is it a threat to Hiratonga? Yep. I'm really interested in getting really good, because do we have to do something about it? That's all.
Yep, so am I. It's a good point. And the SkyTEM will give us some information of what's going on over there. We might pass over the old landfill maybe 2-3 times. And then what we want to do afterwards is identify areas where a ground-based study would give us even greater spatial resolution. So that's definitely one of the areas that we want to look at. So they've got a smaller system now that you can tow around behind a quad bike.
Okay.
It's no good for the whole region because you'd be riding for...
But that is a specific area of risk.
Totally, it's on our radar too,
Good.
absolutely. Yep.
And the other good thing, of course, is that in source protection areas for drinking water supplies,
Yeah.
same technology can be used.
Could you just go back and tell me, did I get you right that you're going to fly over some areas of the sea where the sea is quite shallow?
Yeah.
And see what do you expect? What are you looking for here? What do you expect to find?
Well, there's no bores out there, so we've got theories on what's going on with the... What happens is as the seas come in, like 20,000 years ago it was way out near Mahia, and then 6,000 years ago it was up here, and while it's going in and out, it's laying down silt layers.
Yep.
And if the sea's gone way out here, we really don't know what's going on out here in terms of those. So it's groundwater discharging out here. We don't know where, how much. Finding them would be a great start. So it's just really to start a bit of exploration out there and see what's going on in the groundwater systems offshore.
Well, the fishermen can tell you where the groundwater comes out, because
That's
it's
right.
salination out in the Hawke Bay. But what I'm interested, what I thought you might be looking for, is that if we've got the information, if we have got sea rise, is the Wellington City Council is now predicting to be 1.6 metres this century, which is more than double what they're predicting. If the sea level has risen that much, do we not have then a significant threat of salt water pushing back through the aquifers into the lower reaches of the Hiratonga Plains? Is that what you're looking for as well?
Yeah, that's one of the things we'll be exploring. I mean, we used the GNS used our model as a pilot trial of estimating the risk of saltwater intrusion to these aquifers and sea level rise. And because we think, and your fishermen will confirm it, that these discharges are way out here somewhere.
That's it.
And we've got 10 metres of head here.
Yep.
So there's enormous pressure in the aquifer system. They concluded there's like negligible risk of saltwater intrusion from sea level rise. Biggest risk will be the inundation in these flat areas around here.
I agree with you, the risk is relatively low given the head, but it would be just interesting to know where they are. Secondly, you look like you're going over the lakes in Otani and Pokawa. What are you looking for there?
That's really because we got asked, look, if we got some more money from the PGF, what areas would you look at? And managing the Lake Pukawa relies on understanding the groundwater. There's been some work done there based on very few bore logs, but understanding that the groundwater system in there will help us manage the lake better and inform those decisions. And the same in the Otani Basin. I think the issue there would probably be nutrients and understanding the variability of the aquifer structures through there and the interaction of nitrate and nutrients with those reducing areas in the aquifer to manage the discharge to surface water.
And when you go over Hawke Bay, would you be able to see schools of fish and tell Neil where they are? So improve his fishing.
I'll ask them to keep an eye out.
Right. Great.
So also, I mentioned before that, ideally we'd be able to drill some bores down here to validate the data where we don't have enough. So what we want to do is SkyTEM can produce rough and ready inversions like this within 6 weeks of doing the survey. It'll take us another 6 to 8 months to filter out all the noise and stuff, but within that first 6 week period we want to have a look at the inversions and identify areas where we don't have enough information on what actually is in the ground there to interpret these resistivity models. And then we're using the PGF funding to do 1, maybe 2 deep drilling exercises where it's not just like you're drilling for water, you're going through in every metre getting a really good idea, a really good record of what the aquifer material and the geological materials are in there to validate the model.
So you would drill those wells on one of the lines, would you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've got some deep bores out there already, and we had GNS do a ground-based trial fairly recently near those bores just to provide ground truthing data for the flights.
Yep.
And they found the ground-based data pretty much matched what was going on in there. So there's dollars for that additional drilling, but also other things like, as I said before, that ground-based TEM study around areas like Roy's Hill. There'll be funding for that, towing a quad bike around or doing ground-based stuff to get a really good idea in those really sensitive areas where we need more information. And there's more funding for very high quality inversions to get those resistivity transits. And especially for advanced geological modelling, we want to get some really powerful visualisation tools going here with 3D models that you can sort of fly through and you're in the aquifer. And then also funding for revising the Heratonga groundwater model under contract, and we've actually got our new, let me introduce our new groundwater modeller, Ahmed L1, down the back there. So Ahmed has come in and taking over the work that Pavel was doing and revisiting the Ruatani farm model once the SkyTEM data are in. Ahmed's looking forward to doing that. So look, I'm at the end now, just to talk about the budget and timelines. This is how it is. It's in the report. The actual survey itself is 1.2 million, and then there's about 800 and something K for deep drilling and additional data collection. And yeah, that's how the project's looking at the moment. Delivery of 3D geological models by July 2021, and then revisiting the groundwater models by end of 2022. So it's not a quick rapid fire project. The survey will be done by May, and then the additional data collection, doing those inversions, will take us through to the end of next year.
Right.
Any last questions?
I'm happy to move, Chair.
I'll second.
Second. Any
Happy to
other
third.
comments? Peter?
I just have one. I think this is seriously important work. Thanks very much. And you got the money.
Yeah, no, really good to get this update, Jeff, and this obviously is going to add greatly to our knowledge of our underground water systems. Looking forward to, at some point, seeing the results.
Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge the councillors too, you know, at the last LTP round, supporting this project and realising the value in it. And Amanda Langley, who supported us getting that provincial growth funding with Tom Skirman and Ian. Just really appreciative.
And Rick.
Can I also just say, I think this is really exciting. I read this last night. I was really excited about it. This is very good science. But the other thing I just want to make it, we've got people out there who just considering there's a growing anti-science movement and people who believe in all sorts of mystic things. And that's why I asked you a couple of questions about, do you know what this is, that is. We're going to have very clear answers on this and very clear comparisons, so we don't have people thinking that because this helicopter's flying next to them,
with a big ring,
they've suddenly got an outbreak, a burst.
Well, how will we explain those disappearances?
we will be able to.
I was thinking on the line.
It's lunchtime.
I was thinking chemtrails, but that's okay.
We can categorically tell them it does not bring babies.
Well, anyway, I just want to make you're going to have to handle this really carefully, because all conspiracy theorists will have a great go at this. Let me make no mistake about that. And the comms of this are going to be very clear, and you people are going to have to be absolutely sharp on the facts. Any question, have the answer immediately, tell me comparisons, etc. Any blinking or any indecision, and you'll create doubt in people's minds.
I feel a cartoon coming on.
To set up a new cult.
Can I put the question, please? All those in favor of receiving this report? Aye. Opposed? No. You now have 11 minutes to eat your lunch. We'll reconvene at quarter after.
Take that clock, it's a quarter of an hour.
Quarter after, please.
We have